My Ducati SuperSport is just about ready for another set of tyres. The last set were Pirelli Rosso 4s, and I've kind of noticed a bit of a odd tyre wear pattern on them. The previous set of tyres were Rosso 3s, and there was a weird tyre tread pattern on them as well, and I got Dave Moss to help me diagnose that and to change up a couple of suspension settings to try and rectify it. Anyway, my riding style has changed a lot since the suspension of this bike was first set up for me. So I think I'm at a point where I really want to have the suspension looked at in general and see if that's got anything to do with this weird tyre wear pattern. So highly recommended was MotoLogic down on the Gold Coast. So, well, tomorrow, Bo, my SuperSport, gets a new set of Rosso 4s, but then in a couple of weeks' time I'll be heading down to MotoLogic and getting the suspension tuned for me and for how I ride, and hopefully learn why this weird tyre tread pattern is happening. So what I'm noticing on these Rosso 4s is on the rear tyre, the leading edge of the tread, this leading edge here, is kind of rounded and lower than the trailing edge, which is sort of a bit sharper and certainly higher or kind of raised relative to the front edge of that tread pattern. Now, that's actually happening on the front tyre as well. It might be a little bit harder to see, but again, it's the front edge of the tread that is kind of rounded and wearing differently, and to the rear, or the trailing edge of the tread, which again is sharp. Now that is not the same as the first weird tyre wear pattern I was noticing when I had the Rosso 3s and when I was asking for Dave Moss's help. In that instance, the front tyre was reversed, so the leading edge was sharp and the trailing edge was rounded. So back then, Dave was explaining that with the front tyre leading edge being sharp and the trailing edge rounded, not like it is now, the opposite, that the front had too slow a rebound, and so damping needed to be reduced. But the rear, the rebound was too fast, so we had to increase the rebound damping on the rear. Now, following that same logic from Dave Moss, the current tyre pattern with both tyres leading edges rounded and trailing edges sharp is that rebound is too fast on both the front and the rear, and that I need to increase rebound damping to slow it down. Now, I don't know if that's just, my riding style that could have changed to require a different rebound damping. Who knows? So yeah, it's a mystery to me why this is happening again, a little bit differently this time, because I haven't changed the suspension settings at all since what Dave Moss had advised. So I'm keen to head off to MotoLogic in a couple of weeks' time and see what I can learn, not only about making this bike handle even better for me and have even more fun riding it, but also to kind of get these tyres to last a bit longer, I guess. I'm out for a ride with some Ducati buddies. That's Astrid up ahead, who you already know from previous videos, and Valda and John behind me. We're on the Kilcoy-Mergen Road, having a nice little ride out to Jimna. It's nice and curvy and quiet. So I had the suspension done by Paul Free at MotoLogic down on the Gold Coast. Now, he ended up making a lot more changes than I had expected. Let me summarise them for you. Probably the biggest change was the spring in the rebound fork. He put a slightly heavier one in just to balance out, so I'd have a little bit more spring tension in the front. While he had the rebound fork apart, he took out a shim that apparently prevents the rebound damping settings from operating fully. He did actually. I was there watching and learning. It was great letting me do that. We was apparently right where it needed to be. We sped up the rebound on the back, so took some damping out, and only added, I think, 3/4 of a turn on the spring to add a little bit more preload in the back. So that's the summary of the changes. He was aiming to get more balance in the bike. Straight away he felt the front was too soft, and I think that's a reason for a few of the things I've been experiencing riding the bike, in contrast to the 848 Evo that I have as my track bike. So now, my God, Bo is a different bike to ride altogether. First thing I noticed when I rode away from Paul's place was how under braking the forks just don't dip like they had before. I practiced really hard not to have any fork dip when I come to a stop at traffic lights or stop signs. But I don't have to try so hard anymore because there's just not that soft dipping in the front under front brakes. And kind of related to that, under acceleration, the forks don't extend as much either. So the front of the bike is staying a lot more level, I guess, relative to the rear. Next thing I probably noticed was it just turns a little bit more directly. I wouldn't, like, it turned really well before, there's no question about that. But there's something different about the way the bike turns, and I like it a lot. It does just feel a bit more direct and a bit more controlled, I guess. So third thing I noticed was how it behaves over rough roads. We get to ride a lot of them here. It gets it over and done with quickly, I guess, each bump. So it might feel slightly sharper, but not in a bad way. What it doesn't feel is wallowing. It doesn't feel like it's taking a while to recover from each bump or a succession of bumps. There's a bit of diesel on the road there, I'm not really sure. My favourite difference is how the bike feels around corners now. It just rails. It feels so stable and balanced. It feels a lot more like my 848 does on the track, and that was really the original trigger for wanting to get Bo's suspension checked out. I'm so glad I did. I did ask Paul about the tyre wear problem that was kind of the trigger of getting the suspension tweaked a second time by Dave Moss. And he really felt that so many factors can affect that, not just one or two suspension settings. How I ride, where I ride, the tyres, all kinds of things. So I'll be curious to see whether just making the suspension operate in a more balanced way translates into a different kind of wear, or what do you call it, like a different dynamic through the tyres, the way the tyres behave, and maybe there'll be a different tread wear pattern. But I need to ride quite a few hundred more kilometres before I'll be able to draw any conclusions about that. These are a fresh set of tyres just before I went to see Paul. So it's a good baseline, I guess, to see what happens. So Bo's done 1,054 kilometres since the new Rosso 4s were put on, and I think 742 kilometres since the suspension tune. And already I can see that tyre wear pattern is happening again. So on the rear tyre, the leading edge is starting to get a little bit rounded, and the back edge is still really quite sharp. On the front, there's not quite enough light for you to see, but the trailing edge is getting a little bit rounded, and the leading edge is a bit sharp, and that was the original tyre wear pattern that I noticed on the Rosso 3s that kind of led to this entire investigation into what causes it. So I'm still kind of at a loss of why this tyre wear pattern even happens. And in all honesty, and the reason why I'm making this video is because I've stopped caring. Since Paul Free tuned the suspension, this bike has been a completely different bike to ride. I absolutely love it. And there is no way that I'm going to change the suspension settings now to try and change the tyre wear pattern. It just doesn't seem like a priority anymore. As far as tyre life goes, I don't think this tread wear pattern really is having any bearing on that. The Rosso 3s, where I first originally noticed the pattern, I got 15,000 kilometres out of them. And the last set of Rosso 4s, I got 13,000 kilometres out of those, and that included 2 track days. So I wanted to share this with you, partly because the first video I did on the tyre wear pattern is probably the 3rd most viewed video on my channel. So it's interesting a few people, I suppose. Whether or not you're having the same or similar experience trying to investigate tyre tread wear patterns, I just hope that this video, or both videos of mine, actually give you another data point to kind of try and understand your own situation a bit better. But if you're anything like me, and suspension tuning seems to be a bit of a mystical art, then one thing I'd really recommend is getting an expert to tune your suspension. It just makes a world of difference, particularly if you're not even aware that it's not set up all that well to start with. So my 848 Evo, my track bike, is next in line for a suspension tune by Paul. I may, if that makes a big difference, then I'll probably report that back to you as well in another video on this channel. But until then, happy riding.